Hi, my name is Hania Ali, and I'm going to be talking to you about the development of employability skills in engineering disciplines through co-op. So the agenda for today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the background for the research. I'm also going to be talking a little bit about the institute that the research project was held in, and then we're going to go on to the results and to the recommendations and the next steps. So the research question this whole project centers around is what skills have students developed during their academic career before they enter a work environment? And in particular, what skills are vital for the success of a co-op experience? And by using a skill-based model, how can we understand employability skills and how they are differentiated across engineering disciplines? So the research tools that we are using in this project are a model that defines skills, of faculty interviews and focus groups with students in it. And the way that this is all modeled is we did a literature review that led to a model, and then the model was shown to the faculty, and then there were conversations that adjusted, and then we went to the focus groups, and all of this was then analyzed for results. So the research background, we are using ethnography as the methodology, just so that we can understand the phenomena of skill development. We're not necessarily trying to find a solution, we're just trying to figure out what's happening and why it might be happening. And the framework that we're looking at is community-centered. So we're trying to understand communities of learning and trying to get the larger narrative within each discipline. And for that reason, we're going to be using focus groups, just so that, again, we can get that collective voice and not necessarily individual students. So understanding the gap. So just to understand where this research project fits in the larger narrative of research, we looked at what already exists right now. So one of the research projects that we found were looking at skill development across two different disciplines from an employer's perspective, which is similar to what we're doing. However, we want to get the student perspective. And another research project looked at skill development in business students. However, we want to look at it in engineering disciplines as opposed to in a different faculty. And another research project looks at workplace competencies from the perspective of graduate and undergraduate students, which is similar to what we want to do in the sense that we're trying to get different perspectives. However, we want to compare across engineering disciplines as well. And we generally have been using the Canadian Engineer Accreditation Board competencies that they listed just to sort of guide the rest of the project. So co-op at the Institute of Research, this co-op program that we're going to be looking at takes place in York University in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And the co-op program that we're looking at, the way that it runs is there are a couple seminars that you need to do, the resume and cover letter, and then you can get access to a portal. And then during your co-op term, you will do courses, two courses that are run in different terms, and you submit a final report at the end of each placement. The way the school year is divided at this institute is there are two main semesters where students will be taking most of their classes, and then there's a summer semester. Each of them are 4 months long, and it's divided as such. So the structure of the co-op program is it divides a 4-year program into a 5-year program, and students will be completing 12 to 20 months of work experience. So after their second year of study, during their summer semester, they will be working for 4 months, and then they'll come back for their third year, and then they're going to do another 8 to 16 months of co-op. Now they can start in that summer semester, or they can start in the fall or winter semester, as long as they complete 8 months. And finally, they're going to come back for their final year and graduate. The first step that we did is we developed a model to define all of the skills. So the goal of the model is to design a study, concisely define the skills that are commonly discussed. For example, when we say communication, what does that actually mean? What does that look like? And then establish a reliable list of employability skills. So the way that we did this is we did a large literature review from various databases and coded it in vivo to understand how frequently each skill was repeated and discussed in each of these papers. The main skills that we did find were teamwork, communication, and critical thinking. The whole model actually has more skills than this, and it can be seen in the original paper, and that is based off of what is discussed in this literature and what it says. So the results. The participants in the focus groups were divided into 3 faculties, mechanical engineering, civil engineering, and EECS, which includes electrical engineering, computer engineering, and software engineering. Out of the 11 students that participated in the focus groups, 7 of them were actually part of the co-op program. The other 4 students were students who did internships in their field of study, however, did not choose to participate in co-op. So first, the mechanical engineering students focus groups. So the skills that they highlighted as the most underdeveloped were knowledge acquisition, communication, and initiative, as well as ethical intelligence. So the work environment that students discussed were just that there was a huge disconnect in the communication that was expected from them in school versus at work. They had a very open door policy in school. However, at work, it was a lot more independent folks, and there might have been a little bit of guidance. However, they had to work very separately. And this affected their communication because they were all new structures that they had to communicate within. And there was a lot more interdisciplinary communication that they were not used to. The project management was another thing that was brought up a lot. Students agreed that there was a lot of critical thinking and design thinking in this in their program as well as in the work that they did. However, how much it applied was dependent on how intense their work was regarding research and development versus application. There was an interesting phenomena that came specifically with this group was that students started comparing their skill development to other disciplines unprompted. For example, communication skills were compared to civil engineering students, and this wasn't done to specific students, but rather to disciplines. The faculty conversation that we had was very similar to the ones that students had in terms of everyone agreed that there was a lot of focus on design thinking. However, the faculty undergraduate program director did point out that this is why knowledge acquisition may have been compromised. So there might not have been as much theoretical knowledge being thrown at students, but instead they were asked to apply the knowledge that they did have. And this faculty member did mention a lot more focus on ethical responsibility, which was not majorly focused in focus groups. So for the civil engineering students, the most underdeveloped skills were critical thinking, problem solving, initiative, and ethical intelligence. So a quote that was said by the students was, sometimes you have that knowledge, but you're not able to use it. Students generally seem to agree that there was a very difficult transition from their very one-sided linear problems to the ones that they had to face in the real world, which were open-ended and more application-based. And this new autonomous structure and having very little guidance was very different than what they were used to. In particular, this connects to their critical thinking. They found that there was very little development of integrated complex systems and how they work together. For example, students said that they would like to know how to go from a plot of land to a building. What processes are involved? How do all of those subsystems work together? How do you think outside of the box? Finally, the work environment that the students described, it was very similar to the community thought process in school, in the sense that there was still independent work. However, they mentioned that at work, they had a lot more relaxed structures, and this allowed for more curiosity and more deep learning. And the faculty response that we spoke to the undergraduate program director, and they were agreeing with the students on the very little focus that they had on critical thinking and continuous learning, so in that application sense. However, they did not focus much on teamwork, which is what students actually did discuss quite a bit of. This can be described and understood because the faculty did explicitly mention that they were quite disconnected from the co-op program. And this might actually describe why there might be that disconnect with what they understood and what students found. So the ECS students, the skills that they mentioned were critical thinking, communication, problem solving, and initiative as the most underdeveloped. In regards to design thinking, students described their projects as very constrained and not allowing them to develop any critical deep thinking. And this was a very interesting phenomena because when they got to work, they were expected to do this. And their lack of experience meant that they were not confident in their abilities. So they did have the theoretical knowledge, and that was really good for them. However, that application, that extra step, was really difficult for them to transition to. And workplace disagreements were a huge thing that students discussed. There was a lot of limited experience when it came to teams, which meant that when there were disagreements, students didn't know how to deal with them in the workplace. They found that they were resorting to what they called whistleblowing behavior, which is they would always just take things to upper management instead of dealing it within the team. And this, they found, very much impacted their team dynamics, and they had to find a better way forward. Ethics was a huge thing that students talked about in this case. And in particular, they talked about trainings that they did in the workplace. And instead of ethics being something that they were taught not to do from a very scary perspective, from a cautionary tale, they were told how to be ethical and what to do and what not to do for the sake of safety. So the faculty response, we spoke to a professor in this department, and they agreed with students that there was very little critical thinking and communication. And they described the culture as independent and not as team focused. However, they did not focus much on ethical intelligence, which was a huge component of this focus group. So there was clearly a little bit of a disconnect. This last focus group was unique because it combined programs. There was also a geomatics student. This allowed for more dynamic conversations, and instead of students just agreeing with things or just disagreeing with things, there was a lot more of a driven conversations from the participants. And it was a lot more of an active conversation than the other focus groups had been. So comparing across the disciplines, these are the skills, just kind of recapping the undeveloped skills for each discipline. As you can see, there are quite a few similarities that pop up. So the first one is initiative. Every student we spoke to agreed that there was extreme underdevelopment in their initiative skills in school. However, this was greatly linked to work ethic. Students found that in order to have a successful work term, they had to have initiative. Students agreed that this might be because there was a lack of room within the academic setting, and there's a general culture of rigidity, which is most likely not specific to disciplines or institutes, but maybe a function of academia. Communication was another one. In particular, students found that it was really difficult to balance between general and technical skills and how to work within structures. How do you send emails? How do you talk to people of authority? How to manage those aspects of communication was something that students found that they struggled with. And organization was a very interesting one because no students spoke about it. However, every single student agreed that it was a skill that they had already developed and to some extent mastered before going into the workplace. This seems to indicate that organization is a skill that is inevitably developed through their academic career, not with any course, but just as a function of academia. And that very easily transitions into organization in the workplace. So, recommendations. The first recommendation is co-op course development. In particular, how to upgrade co-op courses. The courses that were currently in place were akin to homework, and students found that it was not very effective. And it might be interesting to develop this course with the help of the students, and how can you actually track skill development and integrate in a way that combine students' experiences as opposed to being disconnected. Another recommendation is bridging that gap between co-op and curriculum. There seems to be quite an untapped resource causing this divide, and it would be really interesting to try and combine what students learn in school and how that applies in the workplace, and understanding each of these cultures so that they could integrate a little bit better. And finally, research and implementation. These recommendations have not been researched too deeply, but these are something that could be looked into. For example, setting up skill-based training modules to cater to each discipline. This would allow students that may be on different skill levels because of their discipline to kind of be on the same level. Another idea would be to facilitate reflection sessions that are interdisciplinary before or after co-op. This would allow students to reflect with students on their experiences and introduce them to interdisciplinary experiences. So next steps for this research, we would like to increase the amount of focus groups so that we can get a little bit more information. We would like to add surveys and quantitative methods just so we can get a large scale understanding of what's happening and not just specific experiences. We also would like to get more faculty perspectives. There were faculty members that we spoke to that had no idea what the co-op experience. So it'd be really nice to get more faculty who may be more connected to co-op or more disconnected to co-op so that they can give their perspective on how they may interact. Also, already there was a divide in between the students and the faculty perspective. So it would be really interesting to also get an employer perspective, just so we can see what's happening on all three fronts. Another step would be to connect co-op to the curriculum and how can these skills be specifically traced to specific classes. And finally, expanding the geographical reach. We would like this to be not just within one institute in one city, but instead going further and getting a little bit more information because this is something that applies outside of this one place. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, please let me know.